Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm your host, Nathan Stables, and joining me this evening are Paris Saint-Germain aficionado, Jonathan Johnson, and our new regular pundit in French football writer, Rich Allen. Welcome to you both. Thank the footballing gods as the Ligue 1 season finally got back underway this weekend. And aren't we all just a little bit delighted that it's back? There were plenty of goals, plenty of incidents, and also some young prodigy that has got everyone a little bit excited. All that and more, including your questions after the latest headlines. As Monaco got their title defence off on the right track in the opening match on Friday evening, beating Toulouse 3-2 thanks to 3 headed goals. Paris Saint-Germain did not allow the signing of one particular very expensive Brazilian being paraded before kickoff distract them from the task at hand, dispatching newly promoted Amiens 2-0 at the Parc des Princes. Saturday's multiplex was headlined by Lyon's big 4-0 win over Ligue 2 champion Strasbourg, with new signing Mariano Diaz and new club captain Nabil Fekir both notching a brace each. Elsewhere, Guingamp came from behind away from home to beat Metz 3-1, while a new-look Rennes also recovered from a 1-0 deficit at half-time to manage a draw with the returning Troyes. Montpellier also got off the mark this weekend with a 1-0 win against Caen, as Saint-Etienne impressed under new manager Oscar Garcia by holding off Nice by the same scoreline. On Sunday, Marcelo Bielsa's reign at Lille got off to a strong start as they romped to a 3-0 win over Claudio Ranieri's Nantes, before Angers and Bordeaux played out an entertaining 2-2 draw at the Stade Raymond Coupa. The late evening kickoff saw the reinvigorated Marseille take on relegation-threatened Dijon, and the hosts did not disappoint, walking out of the Velodrome with 3 unopposed goals and 3 points to boot. In Europe, Nice will take on Napoli in the Champions League playoff round, while Marseille will be entertaining Slovenian outfit Domžale for a place in the Europa League group stages. And in transfer news, Wesley Sneijder has joined the Ligue 1 revolution as he signs with Nice, while Les Aiglons were not finished there, with Alain Saint-Maximin joining from Monaco earlier today as the Principality club replaced him as they announced a deal for former Lyon winger Rachid Ghazal. And that's all for the news. But remember, for all our latest headlines, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week with the biggest news in football, and that is the world record transfer of Neymar to Paris Saint-Germain for a fee believed to be around the £200 million mark. Jonathan, it's been a pretty crazy weekend for yourself. How monumental is this move, not only just for the club or for Ligue, but for the whole game as a whole?
I think it's huge. I think it's huge as far as PSG are concerned, Ligue 1, and like you said, football in general. I mean, obviously, it's the biggest transfer in the history of the game. But also, it's a shift in power as well. It's a club whose ambitious project was stagnating, showing that there is still life in their project, and managing to take away a superstar player from one of the established European giants. And I think that is a massive statement of ambition. It's a big statement of confidence from the player, not only in his own ability, but also that. He thinks that PSG are going in the right direction, and that he'll be able to achieve everything he wants there, both individually and collectively. So, I think it is a monumental transfer, as you said, all across the board.
Let's start close to home then, and I'll bring you in on Rich on this. What do you think his impact to start with is with Paris Saint-Germain? How does he improve this team?
I think he just adds that bit of glamour, I think, that perhaps arguably was missing last season, with Zlatan gone. He just brings that focus back to Paris. So much last season and over the summer has been on the comings and goings at Monaco. It's a statement, isn't it? It's we are here, we're wanting to be, and we are demonstrating that we are the dominant force in in French football and European football as well. So he certainly brings that attention back. I think that was perhaps the first port of call that's from this transfer is everyone's now talking about PSG. Everyone's now focused on the game against Guingamp this weekend. What's Neymar going to do? How's he going to fit into this side? So he brings that back to the club. I think he might bring perhaps ease a little bit of pressure off Edinson Cavani. There are many who criticise the sort of chances that he misses. So having someone like Neymar who can both produce and score goals maybe just takes that pressure off him as well.
Let's also talk about his place in this side, John. And there's probably about 4 players already playing in the wide position for Paris Saint-Germain. Obviously, it was Di Maria and Pastore at the weekend. There's Draxler and Lucas Moura that are also in that situation. You have to safely assume that Neymar's going to be starting. So who do you think's partnering him, and who do you think probably is the odd man out and might be moved on from here?
Well, I mean, it's interesting, like you said, there's lots of players vying for pretty much the same positions at the moment, and PSG have a lot to consider in terms of the players that they keep on, the players that they let go of. I mean, first of all, PSG were going to be selling players this summer, regardless of whether they brought in Neymar or not, because there's quite a lot of dead wood there. I mean, if we're talking specifically about the players who play out wide in PSG's front three, because at the moment it doesn't look like Unai Emery is going to move away from playing that 4-3-3 that became so familiar to us under Laurent Blanc. We're talking about players like Lucas Moura, Angel Di Maria, Julian Draxler. And I think Lucas Moura, for a start, despite the fact that he is good friends with Neymar and they go back a long way, is someone who's worn out people's patience really in Paris, because he's been so inconsistent over the last couple of years, and is arguably, aside from the first 6 months of his time in Paris, basically the first half season that he played, Lucas has never really lived up to the billing. And even then, in those first 6 months, he looked brilliant in flashes, and then was quite disappointing for the rest of it. He's improved statistically over the last couple of seasons, but it's when you watch him play, he still leaves a lot to be desired. Okay, Di Maria had a very poor first half of last season, but he really came into his own in the second half and showed exactly what we came to know from him when he was playing for the likes of Real Madrid. And Draxler was an absolute revelation when he arrived. Now, I don't think Draxler, considering that he only joined back in January, will be pushed out of the exit door so soon. And I don't think that PSG would be on letting somebody of Di Maria's experience and talent go. I think they'd be much more willing to part company with Lucas Moura. But what would be interesting is what happens with the likes of Draxler and Di Maria if PSG do somehow manage to get another one of these players that they're being linked with this summer. I'm thinking of the likes of Kylian Mbappe. If they were able to bring somebody like him in, where does that leave? Like Di Maria. I mean, Draxler and Di Maria are both quite polyvalent, but I'd say that Draxler has the advantage there of the fact that he's only joined up, a couple of months ago. So I think that in terms of the players vying for that position on the pitch with Neymar at this moment in time, I'd say that Lucas is probably most at threat. Giddish, I mean, I haven't spoken much about him so far. He, like Draxler, joined at the beginning of the year. There's been rumours already that PSG are looking for a loan move for him, and I think that would be the smartest thing, particularly if they can find a club in Ligue who'd be willing to take him on, because I think that he could do with playing regular minutes in the league, being able to show what he can do, and then perhaps coming back to Paris and fighting for a first team berth. I mean, the good thing about bringing in Neymar is PSG do strengthen. I mean, okay, it sounds a bit stupid to say they strengthen in depth when you're bringing in a player of Neymar's quality, because of course, you're not just be strengthening in depth. You're going to be bringing in an undisputed member of the starting 11. But PSG have needed more bodies in that area, or specifically players who are capable of playing through the middle. And although it's not his best position, Neymar can play through the middle as well. So immediately Unai Emery has more options available to him, and if he chooses to, which is something that I think he did deserve criticism for last season, he could experiment a bit more. He could change the formation up once in a while, not play 4-3-3 all the time, could go for the 4-2-3-1, which we saw in the very early days when he took over, or maybe even try a 4-4-2. So I don't think it's necessarily all of the players who can play wide in attack that will be, sort of under threat now that Neymar has arrived. I'm surprised that it seems like Lucas Moura is still on his way out, considering how close he and Neymar are. But to me, it makes sense for PSG to push somebody like him out, because I don't really see what he adds on the pitch as a member of the starting 11. Because for me, I don't see much more of a role for him in the future PSG than that of a super sub because of the speed.
Yeah, and he's a little bit more restrictive than some of the others, like a Draxler, who can play as a number 10 if they decide to switch back to a 4-2-3-1. Let's open this up a little bit, Rich, and talk about the wider impact possibly for Ligue 1 with such a superstar joining the ranks of the French division. Can we expect maybe possibly this to feed down to other clubs in the future? The world market wanting to view the league maybe a little bit more. Might some of this trickle down effect happen in the future?
It's difficult to see. We are, over the last 3 or 4 seasons, we're starting to see more money come into the league through foreign investment. We've got the likes of Marseille and Lille, perhaps 2 of the more recent examples of that. It's going to need that continued investment, I think, before we start to see a major effect from this. What I think this transfer does do is, alluding back to my previous point about PSG, I think the same can apply for the league. It brings the whole league into focus. It brings positive and negative points to that, I think. There's going to be a lot of focus. There has been, I think, over the last few years with the players being purchased from the league. But all of a sudden now you've got PSG who, all of a sudden, really, it sort of erupted from sort of a bit of a joke speculation deal to all of a sudden, all right, they've actually bought him. I can only keep saying it, really. It's such a statement signing from somebody perhaps outside of the PSG circuit. It's such a statement signing that PSG, bit of a wounded animal kind of thing. They didn't. Last season was nowhere near the outcome that they were looking for. Embarrassing way to be knocked out of the Champions League. Didn't win the league and title. 2 domestic cups, not particularly the return that Emery was hoping for. So I don't necessarily see this signing having an immediate effect. What I think it will do is continue bringing that foreign investment in. And perhaps that, I suppose, is the effect of the Neymar signing. More and more people are going to look at Ligue 1 as a viable opportunity to invest the money. And I suppose from that, then, we will start to see more and more. We're not going to see signings on this level, maybe, but we're going to see more and more clubs being able to spend the account. We saw that. We saw it with Rennes this summer. All of a sudden, we've gone out and spent 17 million euros on a player. So I think that's the effect we're going to see. Is more and more confidence, I think, in the league from both foreign investment, but also money that exists in the league already.
Yeah, and let's hope that sort of trickle effects helps some of these smaller clubs. Let's talk about the impact on the wider world market now, really, John. And we've mentioned it's a world record fee by a comfortable amount. And at the same time, it was a clever move by Paris Saint-Germain to move while the figure was still relatively achievable in at least today's crazy market. Does this now impact any big move for any big player? It sort of maybe even raises the price. You've mentioned Mbappe's in the wings for PSG, potentially. L'Equipe reporting that at the moment, and there was talks with Sanchez. Maybe that bumps his price up now that they know they've got money. So it makes a big knock-on effect to sort of jump the whole world economy almost in football, doesn't it?
It doesn't. I mean, I think what it will impact is the way that clubs handle interest from other clubs when their player has a minimum fee release clause in their contract, because obviously, we're talking about mainly French football all the time. And those release clauses don't exist, so it's never really an issue for French clubs when big clubs come in for their players, like we saw earlier this summer when Barcelona came in for Verratti. The easiest way, if you want to buy a player from another big club and you know that the player is unsettled there, is to activate their minimum fee release clause. Not every player is going to have a minimum fee release clause as astronomical as Neymar's. I mean, okay, there are a few bigger in the game, the likes of Messi, Ronaldo, but apart from that, you're going to be hard pressed to find a minimum fee release clause as elevated as Neymar's was. And I think that it's not going to impact the price of players like Mbappe and Sanchez, who don't have those clauses, or at least Sanchez doesn't appear to have a minimum fee release clause in his contract. But I think what it will do is it will impact the way that clubs who have players who do have those clauses in their contracts, so particularly in Spain, will handle the interest that comes in from the other clubs in their players in the future, because they will just say simply, if you want the player, you activate their minimum fee release clause. That gives us no choice about it, and then it's up to the player if they agree to come and join you or not. And I don't think we're going to be seeing another move like this price-wise in the next couple of years, but it wouldn't surprise me if gradually some of the transfer deals done by other clubs, maybe even PSG again sometime in the future, because I think there's going to be a big economic impact on PSG by bringing in Neymar, and I think that PSG will find themselves in a much better financial position long term, even if short term to medium term they have put a lot of money into this. And I do think these transfer fees will gradually creep up to somewhere close-ish to Neymar's, but I think it's going to be a long time before we see anything, of this level, and perhaps even greater than that.
And that it might almost be the coffers up for this season at least, and that means that they've not really been able to strengthen other areas, Rich. So what would be a measure of success for the club this season, given that they've spent a lot of money on one player? Do they still need to win that treble and maybe get a little bit further in the Champions League?
I think they have to. League and title is an absolute minimum. They can't go 2 seasons without winning that. They've got to show that they can bounce back from the poor way that they went out of the Champions League last season. It's been such a hoodoo over them that they can't seem to get over this hurdle to progress where they want to get to in the Champions League. With Emery having been brought on board seemingly with that task and that task alone, so I think the bar is going to be set very high this season. Neymar signing is only going to heighten that. But yeah, they have to. Their measure of success is Ligue and title, is semi-finals of the Champions League, probably as a minimum. There are still 1 or 2 areas I think that they do need to strengthen. Whether their summer transfers have finished yet remains to be seen. I would be amazed. Just going back to the previous point that Jonathan was touching on, I would be amazed if the signing of Neymar doesn't mean that Monaco will be asking for more money for Mbappe. I've seen these figures that 160, 180 million that Monaco want from Mbappe. They're probably going to be playing more hardball, I think, on those numbers with PSG now. So
I completely agree with you, Rich. But I think, one thing is, if we're actually taking an interest in Mbappe seriously, you're right that they need to strengthen in other areas. And I think the obvious area that they need to strengthen in is defensive midfield. So the first thing that sort of jumps out to me when people talk about this interest in Mbappe is, well, they've now got their star in Neymar. And if they're really going to go for a Monaco player, why they're not going for somebody like Fabinho instead of Mbappe? Might have to pay a bit more money than he's worth, but it's still going to be cheaper than what Mbappe will ultimately cost if PSG are to prize him away from Monaco.
Exactly. Or he's perhaps played last season a bit more of an attacking role, but you've got Sarri, Nice, seemingly Nice seem to have basically said, if somebody wants to pay us 40 million, they can take him. It seems to be that they're advertising the fact that they're willing to let him go at this price. Well, that should be fairly sort of peanuts for PSG, and a player that could make the difference for them when it comes to the sort of latter stages of the Champions League. So there are areas to some, but yeah, their measure of success this season has to be regain the league and title, and they really do have to get to that semi-final level of the Champions League.
I mean, we talk about it every season when people are discussing the goals that PSG set themselves at the beginning of the year. But I think this season more than ever, I really think that we'll see PSG prioritise both the league and the Champions League. And it really wouldn't surprise me if both domestic cups are disregarded. It's not particularly an attitude that I like to see. But when you consider the success PSG have enjoyed in the last couple of years in the domestic cups, the fact that they're now the undisputed most titled club across both Coupe de France and Coupe de la Ligue, it would make sense for them in some ways this summer to play absolutely purely reserve sides when they play in the domestic cups. And by reserves, I don't mean players from the youth academy. I mean the players that aren't starting week in, week out, which will still make PSG a strong side in the competition. But yeah, you probably rarely see the likes of Neymar take to the pitch for PSG in the Coupe de la Ligue or the Coupe de France this season, because I think it's that important that they get, they win the Ligue 1 title back, and that they get to at least the semi-finals, because I don't think another quarter-final appearance and then bowing out, in less embarrassing circumstances than they did last season, but bowing out all the same, will cut it. Certainly not as far as Emery's job is concerned.
I want to end this talk with a focus back on the player, really. Neymar obviously mentioned how important really it is. There's been great articles from Tim Vickery about how much he wants to win that Ballon d'Or, and being in the shadow of Messi at Barcelona really hinders anyone from shining out. Regardless of that, John, and regardless of it being Ligue 1 and bits like that, how big of a risk is this for Neymar to go out on his own against what the traditional norms of being at a traditional big club and try and establish himself as the star of this club?
Yeah, of course it's a big risk, but at the same time, if he really truly believes in himself and his ability to win the Ballon d'Or, his ability to make a difference on his own, leading his own team, it's something that he had to do, in order to discover for himself. And I think that he deserves, plenty of respect for making that decision. Okay, people, have been sort of vilifying him for leaving Barcelona, but I find it sickening at times, to be perfectly honest with you. This sort of pro-Barcelona attitude, it's almost like it's incredulous. It leaves people incredulous. The thought that a player would dare to want to leave Barcelona, to sort of push themselves further, to challenge themselves, to step out of Messi's shadow, when it would be, better for the club, obviously, if he stayed there and kept winning trophies as part of the MSN trio. And I think that, yes, of course, it's a big risk for Neymar. He's, like I mentioned earlier, joining a club that has seen its ambitious projects stagnate over the last couple of seasons, because as embarrassing as the Champions League exit at Barcelona was last season, to be honest, I think PSG are still recovering from the fact that they went out to Manchester City the season before that in the Champions League, because that's when they were really primed to get to the semi-finals or better, and they really should have done as well. They should have knocked City out, and they failed, and to me they've never really gotten over that. It was for that reason that Laurent Blanc lost his job, and it was the decision to part with Laurent Blanc and bring Unai Emery in that was one of many destabilising factors going into last season. So yeah, of course, Neymar is taking a risk, because he's joining a project that is still sort of starting to show that there is still life in it yet. And there's a lot of pressure now on him coming in to be that difference maker. And as I was saying, just a Champions League quarterfinals appearance once again is not really going to cut it now. We're talking about semi-finals minimum, and that's what he's going to have to do. So yeah, of course it's a big risk, because at the end of the day, this is still, for the most part, the same squad that PSG had that went out in the Champions League last season and got exposed in Ligue 1 as well, for basically just being too mentally fragile. And okay, Dani Alves has been added as well, lots of experience, larger than life character, but it remains to be seen whether the additions of Neymar and Alves, and to a lesser extent Yuri Bacici, will add enough to get PSG over this sort of mental barrier that they have, because you can argue that it's not really a question of talent for PSG once it gets to the latter stages of the Champions League. It's a question of bottle, and a lot of the time, their big stars don't turn up in the biggest matches, and they mentally crumble, and that's certainly what happened in the second leg against Barcelona last season. So yeah, it is a risk of Neymar's, but at the same time, coming into that squad, into that dressing room, when there's so many Brazilians, so many of his friends, he'll be very comfortable very quickly. And I think that of all the clubs that he could have joined from Barcelona, PSG made the most sense with those sorts of reasons. So I think he'll be primed for success sooner at PSG than he would have been anywhere else.
I do have to admit, I admire the brass cojones on him to go out there on that almost old school NBA attitude of wanting to be the man of your team and really try and find success that way. It's a trait that's sometimes often lost in football, where they try and, at the moment at least, group up into big groups of quality players in one team. It's quite exciting to see one player go, right, I'm going to establish myself as the man of this team, because I'm going to, maybe not single-handedly, obviously, because it's just obviously a big team game, but be that one to be the standard bearer for this club. It's going to be a real risk for him, but I do wish him the best. Let's move on to action on the field, at least now. And they always promised that the revolution would be televised, at least. And for both of the new money clubs in Marseille and Lille, it was an imperative they shone under the cameras on Sunday. Both got strong wins, but let's start with L'OM, Rich. What did you think to their updated side against Dijon?
I didn't expect Clinton and G to be the hero. Through all the people, the players that they brought in over the summer, I didn't see Clinton and G being the man to change the fortunes in a game. But can't argue with a 3-0 win. I think first half they were a little bit off the ball. I think off the pace slightly. It took the slightly, at the time anyway, it seemed slightly strange substitution of Captain Dimitri Payet off at half-time, and Clinton and G brought on. Turns out Payet did just have a slight tweak and just wanted to make sure it didn't develop into anything more serious. But yeah, first half didn't really seem to be at the races. They were sort of struggling to create things, struggling to break down quite an organised Dijon side. There was only one or two minor chances. I think one Thauvin free kick late in the first half. But yeah, and G came on. He's sort of energetic chaos, I think, is probably the best way to describe G. From those that can remember his time at Lyon. He came on, just added that a little bit of burst, that little bit of unpredictability that perhaps the forward line were lacking slightly. Turned the game around, got 2 goals, 2 perhaps very fortuitous goals, because I think one was certainly the second one, huge deflection. First one, he sort of seemed to just fall into the ball, but you've got to be there, you've got to score them. So work in progress still, but 3-0 against albeit quite a poor Dijon side. Certainly in the second half, they really sort of disintegrated. But you can't knock a 3-0 win ultimately. So it's a good opening game, but certainly not something they can look back and think jobs are good and jobs done.
John, what do you think to Marseille's summer, really? A lot of their players have been more of the established kind and the name recognition with the likes of Gustavo, Rami, Germain being another one, maybe lesser so. But what do you think to their recruitment this summer and their building towards maybe at least a contender for those Champions League places?
Well, I like some of the moves. I think Germain is a shrewd move. He's been underrated in Ligue 1 now for a number of seasons. Finally got some of the credit that he has deserved for quite a long time because of the way that he was involved in Monaco's title success last term. But otherwise, I feel that he's still quite underrated as a goal scorer in Le Championnat. I think that bringing in a reliable goalkeeper. I mean, he was established number one there for so many years and captain, and now coming back. Mandanda is a good move for all concerned. He needed to play. Marseille needed a reliable keeper, so that's one position of need out of the way. And then you've got experienced heads in the likes of Rami and Gustavo, and I think they're both good moves. So for me, those four signings, have been intelligent, well considered. It sounds as well like Jordan Amavi may well be on his way in as well. And I think that would be another excellent pickup for Marseille. I mean, I don't think it's enough yet to have them sort of at the same level as like a Monaco, where they can realistically challenge PSG for the Ligue 1 title on paper this season, but I think that they're definitely looking much better on paper than they were last term. Even if they weren't that convincing against Dijon, it's still got a long way to go this season. Even before the players are sort of at their peak in terms of match fitness. But there are certain members of that squad. We were talking about Payet. Played a half and went off with a bit of a tweak at half time. I think overall, he's been a bit underwhelming since returning from West Ham. He only had the second half of last season, but he's going to need to do much more this term, especially now that he's been appointed captain as well. So I think it's looking positive for this Marseille project, certainly in terms of getting back towards challenging to be in the Champions League. But in terms of talking about ultimate title contenders, you do some smart bits of business, as Marseille have done, and then you see PSG go and splash an enormous amount of money on Neymar, and then be linked with big money moves for the likes of Mbappe as well. So it still makes you feel like you're a million miles away from from your targets. I'm sure that's how Marseille felt a bit when PSG swooped in for Neymar. But at the same time, it's also quite good for them because it takes a bit of the pressure off of them and the other teams that could potentially challenge PSG for the title this season, because nobody's going to be looking at them too much praising the good business that they've done, because everybody's going to be too busy obsessing over Neymar when he finally makes his debut for PSG. So I think that suits Marseille at the moment. They'll be able to fly under the radar a little bit and perhaps be surprise title challengers at one point this season. Even if I do expect over the course of the campaign for PSG to win the league quite comfortably.
Rich, is this a sustainable approach from Marseille signing these more bigger names? I know in theory they've got younger players in that mix with Thauvin and Lopez and Sanson, who they signed last January, but is it a right approach to get them into the level they need to be at the moment with these more named players than going for, say, a youth approach?
I actually think it is. I think they've actually recruited quite smart. There's still more recruitment needed. I do think they're going to need an additional centre forward. They will need fullback options. I don't think Ever and Sakai are perhaps the first choice fullbacks that they'll be needing going forward. But if they can bring Jordan Amavi in at left back, in theory he can cover right back as well. I don't overly like to see him played there, but There's still one or two areas that they need to improve, that they need to recruit in. But I think by and large, their recruitment this summer and back in January has actually been quite smart. They brought in experienced people. They're not necessarily ever falls into that category. The others aren't in that criteria if you're only bringing them in for 1 or 2 seasons. You're going to get 3, 4, 5 seasons out of these experienced guys. So recruiting-wise, it's very good. It's only going to help the likes of Tovan. It's only going to help the likes of Lopez, who are the future of this team. Future and now of this team, as we saw Tovan have such a great season last season. So I think actually it for this Marseille side, who so urgently need a level of stability after countless consecutive seasons of disarray, both on and off the pitch, they're going to need that level of consistency, that level of stability. So these kind of players are going to bring that. So I think for Marseille and this particular project, yeah, it's the right strategy to follow.
And in terms of Lille, let's talk about them now. They had brought in a lot of players in the summer, John, around 14 or 15 different first-team players mixing in there and adding to what they already had. They already looked like a bit of a Bielsa team, and a strong win at the weekend against a pretty decent Ligue side. That should give them confidence, shouldn't it, heading into what will be usually a fast start for an El Loco side at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can look at the way that some of the players, some of the new arrivals performed in particular. I was impressed with the way that Malcuit handled himself. And yeah, there are a lot of moving parts in the squad, as there always are when Bielsa is concerned. But ultimately, it looks like some of these sweeping changes, will be for the better. There's the makings of a very vibrant side there. And they've signed some players who are very, very highly regarded. So I'm particularly interested to see how the likes of Maya does. He was a player PSG were looking at for quite a while. So for Lille to be able to bring him in is quite a coup. Pepe as well, coming in from Angers. He's a player, who has really impressed over the last season or so. So I think that there are lots of reasons to be excited about this this Lille revolution. I was surprised at how comprehensively they were able to beat Nantes, certainly in terms of the scoreline, but at the same time the match could have been very, very different. If certain chances have been taken at certain moments. I'm thinking particularly of there's a really good non-chance in the first half, and it's a good start to the Bielsa era, and there are the makings of a very talented side that's going to be able to play some great football and be one of the teams that people really want to watch in Ligue 1 this season. I do still think they need to strengthen in 1 or 2 other areas, but at the same time, it's hard to really tell exactly which areas are most pressing in terms of reinforcements when there's so many new players bedding in that it's difficult to get a really clear picture.
Rich, what do you think about how this team's being built? It's in more of a Monegasque way, you might say, in that they're going for these young players that they're looking to help grow and progress. Is that maybe a little bit more sustainable in the long run, that you can maybe keep a couple of players that don't quite move on or don't quite reach the heights? Or is this maybe a little bit more of a riskier way of trying to do it?
I think, yeah, it is a riskier strategy. I think, you compare it to the Marseille project, where they're looking, as I said before, to bring that stability in. Lille have gone out straight away. I think they've been quite vocal in the fact that they want to do what Monaco are doing. They want to bring these young, talented players in, build them up, let them shine, sell them on for a huge profit. I think they've been quite clear that that's a route that they're certainly considering and looking to go down. Obviously, then that your scouting is done properly. They've spent quite a chunk of money this summer on some players who have a lot of potential, but of course who are not yet proven at this particular level. So that does carry its own risk. We all remember Monaco when they first came up a few years ago from Ligue. They spent huge sums of money. They brought in Moutinho, Falcao, James Rodriguez, and spent big. it was only then, a year or two later, have they then moved and adapted and modified their strategy into this current model that works so well. So it's quite a risky strategy to do it just straight away without gaining that experience that Monaco did by going out, spending big, and sort of having a successful side that these youngsters can be brought into. They're sort of starting almost from the bottom. So it carries a lot more risk than the Monaco strategy. I was really impressed with their performance against Nantes. I thought with the sheer number of new players in that squad, I didn't think they'd look anywhere near as organised, anywhere near as clinical as they were. I thought they were thoroughly impressive. As Jonathan pointed out, Malqui, I think, was excellent at right back. Even Depreville and Benzia playing in a slightly more central role. I'm really looking forward to seeing how he can perform under Bielsa. It lost track of the amount of times that people have said we're looking forward to seeing what Benzia can do. Years and years now, but we saw glimpses under Antonetti the kind of player he can actually be when there's a sort of disciplinarian in charge who's not afraid to hand down the letter of the law to Benzia, who needs that every now, more than every now and again. So with someone like Bielsa, finally, I don't want to say it, but could we finally see the Benzia that we were hoping all those years ago to see? There's a lot of exciting things about the Steel project, but underpinning it all is that level of risk. They've passed their first test with flying colours, but it's the cliche goes, it's a long old season yet.
Yeah, anything seems to be possible under Bielsa, and especially when you've got Depreville in tow as well. Anything can be possible. Let's talk about the new boys really in Ligue, and as with every season, there's obviously some new blood, and we've got Strasbourg, Troyes, and Amiens joining us this season. The three sides only picked up a point between them really on that opening weekend, so we'll start with the one that managed to get a draw, and that's Troyes. Rich, how did they fare against Rennes?
They were helped by playing us in their first game, to be perfectly honest. It was a very disjointed Rennes performance. Troyes, first game of the new season, having been promoted last season at home, important to make a strong, positive statement. And they did. They got their goal. Perhaps a touch unfortunate to have only come away with 1 point. In large parts of the game, they actually look quite comfortable on the ball. We'll touch on the other two teams shortly, I'm sure, but certainly, as the point showed, by far the most impressive, I think, of the three. And I think of the three, certainly, I think carry the most potential to retain a Ligue status come the end of the season.
Yeah, which is a major difference when you think back to the 2015-16 season where it took them 22 games to even register a win. Let's talk about Amiens now, just before you go, John. Obviously, they were maybe the forgotten party really in the Neymar parade at the Parc des Princes at the weekend, but they had a couple of glimpses of goal while it was still 1-0. Maybe it was PSG being a little bit lax, but there was a couple of signs of something maybe there.
I think they were well organised. The squad obviously have a good understanding, know each other very well. I honestly don't think that they have enough quality to stay up ultimately, but we've seen sides with lacking in quality, but who are very well organised and sort of know their limits, do well in Ligue 1 in the last couple of seasons. So for me, I think that Amiens could make a fist of survival. I ultimately don't expect them to be successful, but it's harsh to judge them just after the first game at Parc des Princes. They didn't get embarrassed by PSG. Losing 2-0 away in your first match in Ligue 1 is there's no shame there. But at the same time, if PSG had decided they wanted to turn it on at any moment, they could have absolutely annihilated Amiens. And I think whereas Strasbourg have so many new players gelling into their team, a bit like Lille, Amiens don't really have that many new members to bed in. A lot of the starting 11 is the same starting 11 that won promotion from Ligue 2 last season, and I think that although their understanding will allow them to upset teams every now and then, particularly when they play at home, I don't think that they're ultimately going to have enough quality to comfortably avoid relegation. But I've said the same about other teams in the past and then been proved wrong. So we'll have to wait and see for them. But yeah, I wouldn't say that Amiens are the favourite of the three newly promoted sides to stay up. In fact, I'd probably say that they're the least favourite, because at least Troyes have experience on their side. They're a bit of a yo-yo club in the last couple of years, but they know what it's like to play Ligue 1 week in, week out, and that's probably why they haven't made that many signings this summer, and they've not let go of too many players either, whereas Amiens are experiencing all of this for the first time.
Yeah, thank you for joining us again, John, for this week, and hopefully speak to you again soon. Do check out some of his work this week. It's been pretty superb on the Neymar stuff. Thanks again, John. Thanks
a lot for having me on, guys, and I'll speak to you soon.
Rich, I wanted to move on to the final promoted side at least, and that's Strasbourg, who were a little bit soundly beaten by Lyon, but a couple of the goals were pretty shocking, really. And is there some real worries about the way they particularly defended, particularly in that second half against Lyon?
It wasn't good, to put it bluntly. It wasn't good. I think that the sort of circumstances need to be taken into account. This is a Lyon side who had to come out and make a real statement. They've lost three, arguably their three biggest players this summer. Lacazette, Tolisso, gone along. They were under probably far more pressure than Strasbourg were to come out and put in a real performance. It's just unfortunate for Strasbourg that Lyon did. I think you look at that Strasbourg side, there's Ligue 1 experience there. That's the key. You've got players like Kayden Mangan, you've got Benjamin Cornier, you've got Jonas Martin, who's come back to the division. They've got Ligue 1 experience. Potentially, they have that key thing in a goal scorer in Idriss Sadi. So that's the important factor. That's why I do see Amiens as an almost certainty to go down, as I don't know where their goals will come from. There are a couple of other Ligue 1 sides who fall into that category as well. So I think Strasbourg will have enough. I think Troyes will have enough. Unfortunately for Amiens, I almost see them, the sort of similarities between them and Gazalec a couple of seasons ago. The sort of plucky underdog Ligue 2 side who perhaps shouldn't have been in Ligue 1. They're sort of almost taken by surprise by the fact that they're in Ligue 1, but they'll thoroughly enjoy themselves. But sadly, as Jonathan said, I just don't think they're going to have enough quality.
Yeah, and thinking back to Strasbourg, they obviously have Thierry Loret, who was that manager at Gazalec Ajaccio when they were really fighting against, up a hill it almost seemed at times, but they had a really good winter spell, and having someone with that experience at that club with some of that Ligue 1 player experience as well, it might just be enough to help them get over what was a pretty awful start to the fair against Lyon. Let's move on now really to a new section, which is our Ligue 1 snapshots. I thought it would be nice to talk about some of the things we might have missed from the main sort of sections of the show. So I'll ask yourself, Rich, and I'll have a couple of moments for myself that happened over the past 7 days in French football that we haven't really talked about, but the audience at least should hear about. I'll start with you, Rich. What is your Ligue 1 snapshot?
It's back to that Lyon-Strasbourg game for me, and it's just how well that Lyon front, I suppose you look at. Everyone's role has slightly changed at Lyon. I think with the transfers that have occurred over the summer, you've got Fekir now who's captain. When I first heard that news, I was a bit curious. I thought Anthony Lopez was a certainty to get that, or maybe even Lucas Toussaint. But Fekir's been given it. First job, captain the side, first game of the season, 2 goals, mature performance, A star for the rating. So great for him. Memphis Depay, got over a pretty shocking miss very early on in the game. But it's the two new signings, Mariano Diaz and Bertrand Traore, who really, really impressed and arguably were the league's best two players over the first weekend. Traore looked like he was having a lot of fun down the wing, causing the Strasbourg defence no end of problems. Won the penalty. Mariano Diaz, two very well taken goals. He's got arguably the biggest boots to fill of any player in that side. He's the one that they're going to look to for goals in Lacazette's absence. So, 2 goals for him on debut. It's. I think a lot of Lyon fans are perhaps coming into this season with a little bit of fear, a little bit of concern. I'm not a Lyon fan, but I was going into the season thinking, could this be a season where Lyon could finish sort of 5th, 6th and really struggle for that top 4 place? This was as good a performance as you could have hoped for, I think, as a Lyon fan. Helped by playing a newly promoted side, no doubt about that. But it was a real strong performance, thoroughly impressive.
I'm going to keep my questions on Mariano Diaz. Yeah, his first goal was keeper should really do better with that, and the second he's gifted it from a pair of defenders hitting the ball at each other and playing him through. It's maybe a little bit, but it's nice to see Fekir back a little bit. And we keep having these false dawns, so I don't want to get too excited again. But him playing and him being fit and playing every week, hopefully for the rest of the season as the captain, might just be enough to maybe convince. Go ahead, Rich.
He's got that captaincy. Yeah, he's got that captaincy responsibility. He's also got that responsibility now of there is no Tolisso, there is no Gonlon, there is no Lacazette. In terms of creativity, spark, leadership, the go-to player, it's him. And perhaps all that thrust upon him all in one go, to many player, maybe too much. Fekir, let's hope not, because pre-injury, there were very few players around Europe as good as him in that sort of age group. So if he can get anywhere close to where he was before, superb. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how Lyon and Fekir in particular do.
Yeah, let's hope that's the spark that lights the fire really underneath him a little bit. I've got 2 moments really for us, and they're both really nice, pleasant ones at least anyway. The first was, you might have already seen the video if you've been trundling Twitter this weekend. It's Marcelo Bielsa and Claudio Ranieri's little in the tunnel tussle between each other, complimenting each other. Ranieri saying, Bielsa saying he was in not so many words, a treasure, and Ranieri going, "Oh, you're the same," and Bielsa said, "No, don't be so modest. It's absolutely you. You take it." And it was quite nice to see such respect between 2 statesmen that have done so much for the game in different ways, and it's a little bit rare to see, in all honesty. We don't get to see those little, maybe more intimate moments where they did show real, true respect between each other. It was a really nice moment. And the other one is a little bit more poignant at Montpellier with the great tribute to the former president, obviously, Louis Niacalan, who passed away sadly this summer. They all had Lulu on the back of their shirts. When Kamara scores the goal, he points to it at the back as well. And it was a little bit much for his son who's about to take over as well. But it was a really lovely send off a man who maybe didn't say the right things at sometimes. He was maybe a little bit controversial, but he really had a passion for his club, unlike many other owners that we have in the modern game. And he'll be sadly missed, especially at a club that he did so much for. But we'll finish on
just on that. It was also really nice to see the scorer of that goal. If you're going to have a Montpellier player scoring that goal to honour Nicolan, very fitting that it was Souleymane Kamara.
Yeah, it was really nice. It was a really nice moment as well. We'll finish this week with another new section, which is some viewer questions. So we've asked you on Twitter to get in touch and let us know what questions you want to ask us this week. So we start with a friend of the show, Chris Carpenter, who's messaged in. So we've talked about Lyon already, Rich, but is this a dawning of a new era of young talent with a point to prove, or simply a good opening day win?
Yes, it is a good opening day win. There are a lot of, just smattering of young players who are going to be playing regular first team football. I would still count Fekir perhaps just as a youngster, maybe. But you've got Lucas Toussaint, who should have a big season ahead of him. He's going to be stepping into Gonalon's shoes. So we those who've watched him for a while have been hoping that he'd been given this chance, and now he's been given it. So really, really looking forward to seeing how he can do. But there are then a couple of youngsters who are going to be playing bit parts, some really exciting youngsters. So I think we're going to have to give them a little bit longer before we decide, is this a new dawn of youngsters coming through? I think there's some very raw youngsters. So I think a little bit of time is going to need to be given before we can actually make a proper, clear-cut assessment on how Lyon's future is going to look. But as regards a first test, you can't complain. Very, very good first day performance.
Yeah, and we all had that worry when they've lost two really integral players, but they've brought some nice, interesting players in. And like you mentioned, Rich, someone like, I'll mention his name, but I'll probably butcher it now, my French pronunciation. But I mean, Gouiri is spelled Gouiri, if you wanted to know for a better pronunciation. But he's a 17-year-old that a lot of people are very excited about if he maybe gets a chance. Bertrand Traoré is still in his 20s, early 20s. So is Fekir. They've got a nice attacking lineup with Depay as well, still of a young age with a point to prove. Maybe they might do something in this interesting moment where behind PSG, some of the other teams are rebuilding or reshaping. It might still have an opening for them. Next question, which is from Frederic Otar. Can Germain be Marseille's main striker this season? Another striker should be signed, but a Giroud figure to be the main man or someone younger, Rich?
I would love to see Germain being given that first choice striker role for Marseille. Big fan of his. He's such a seemingly. I guess we're saying he's such an underrated player. Does that continue to make him underrated? I don't know. But he's a great player. He made some really intelligent runs in that opening win against Dijon on Sunday night. We saw what he did with Monaco last season. He did play an important role. He scored a lot of very important goals. And then the season before that, when he was on loan with Nice, he helped lead the line there. Got well into double figures in goals there. So I'd love to see him being given that opportunity. I do think, though, Marseille will. I think they need to bring in an additional striker because they're sort of lacking, aside from Germain. They are lacking in the centre forward department. So I do expect them to bring someone else in. I'd quite like to see them play a 4-4-2, or certainly two up front with Germain. I think Germain alongside Giroud could be a fantastic partnership. Germain is such an intelligent player with the movement and the runs that he makes. Could thrive alongside a player like Giroud. Before people write in, I'm not making the direct comparison, but sort of how Griezmann plays with Giroud for the national team. Griezmann makes those runs, can feed off Giroud's knockdowns and the way that Giroud can hold the ball up. So maybe something like that could work. But there's then questions to be asked about who gets dropped out of the midfield. So maybe they will stick with the formation that they have. But I would love to see Germain being given the opportunity. But yeah, I do think that Marseille will be bringing in an additional striker.
Yeah, I think there's no question that they'll bring someone in. But again, I would like it to be someone possible. With this named sort of recognition getting Germain, I'd quite like a younger player to come in and behind him if they can. I'm trying to think of names really, but maybe even a statement, even like a Kasper Dolberg at Ajax. Yes, he might want to play more consistent first-team football, but that's more of a statement of intent of getting a exciting young player, maybe just to cap off this interesting summer. Maybe a Nikolai Jorgensen at Feyenoord. He had a very good season as well. He's a bit more of a physical presence that would be a similar type to Giroud, where you could play a 4-4-2 with Germain. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to go for that one more big signing to sort of maybe out Germain, and that it'd be really disappointing if they don't, because he creates 2 goals at the weekend as well. I thought he was really superb, and he was great in the first leg of the Europa League games as well. It'd be such a shame to see him nudged out for another big name that's come through as well. We'll finish with one last question, and that's from the Australian, as his flag is showing, OL fam. Out of the Ligue heavyweights, Rich, who do you think set the standard, so to speak, after week 1?
I suppose it depends on your definition of heavyweights. Lyon have the standout scoreline and perform very, very well. Marseille, 3 goals, 3-0 win, great. I'm not sure PSG or Monaco, perhaps the 2 biggest heavyweights. I think there was glimpses there of just what their quality can be, but also glimpses of a little bit of frailty there. So it really does depend on your definition of heavyweight. I mean, I would arguably say that the best performance of the weekend from a team you would expect to be challenging for a European place was probably from Lille. I think with the sheer number of new players that were being juggled by Bielsa, the way that they blended together and worked as a team, really, really impressive. So if your definition extends to European challengers, then I would probably say Lille.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to not agree with you there, Rich. I mean, PSG maybe didn't really get out of third gear. Monaco really struggled at times. They let 2 simple goals in against Toulouse, really. But I'm going to go for another European challenger that impressed me, at least, and that was a team that did very little of that last season, and that's Saint-Etienne. They got off to a very fast start against Nice and managed to keep them out for the rest of the 89 minutes that they played, and relatively comfortably, really. I don't remember Nice really troubling Ruffier a great amount other than a Asarik chance in the first half, but they look a little bit revitalised. We've mentioned in the past on the pod that under Christophe Galtier, they'd sort of slowed down. They'd almost become so defensive they'd gone in within themselves. But adding a few players like Dioisi, the young midfielder from Empoli, he was really impressive, added a little bit more verve. It looks like they've replaced the robot that was Brian Darboe last season with the real Brian Darboe, because he was absolutely terrific in this one. He was much more of the box-to-box dynamic player that we saw at Montpellier really do really well. And they just looked a little bit more dangerous up front as well. Jonathan Bamba gave them an extra dimension. Dione came on and was buzzing around. He wasn't Nolan Roux standing like a pole in the middle of the pitch. They just look a better side, all of it together, and it gives Hamouma more space to do something creative. It's added areas for like Pierre Gabriel's in the side now and attacking, and Sadianko was added maybe enough cover to cover for the loss of Kevin Malquier. I'm really intrigued by them this season. They've caught my attention. They probably should have scored 1 or 2 more, and then it would have been a really impressive performance. But there's little tidbits there that we might be seeing a different Lever this season that we might have missed for a few seasons, wouldn't you say, Rich?
Yeah, absolutely. I think almost the departure of Galtier has just allowed some of the existing players to perhaps feel a little bit more expressive in the way that they play. Galtier seemed very firm on, we're going to be very organised, very resolute. It's not conceding rather than scoring more than the opposition. And that really sort of limited how some of those creative players could perform. So under Oscar Garcia, maybe those existing players are there, the new players that have come in, everyone's just got that sort of slightly more relaxed sense of, well, actually, we can go out and play our natural game. There's a blank bit of paper almost now with Saint-Etienne, now that Galtier's gone after such a long time in charge, that these players can sort of go out, attack, play some entertaining football. And I never thought I'd be saying that about Saint-Etienne.
No, and like I said, when you've got a solid base like Loic Perrin and Stéphane Ruffier is an excellent goalkeeper to have behind you, you've got such a solid foundation to build an attacking team, if you wish, which looks like it might be the case under Garcia. We shall wait and see, because there's plenty of the season left to go. But that's all we have time for this evening. My thanks to Jonathan and Rich for joining me, and of course to everyone at home tuning in. Join us for the preview show on Thursday, which will be hosted by Adam White, who will be subbing in for the absent Eric Devin, and the main show will be back at the same time, same place next week. A bientôt and goodbye.